And that is this deferred euthanasia bill or voluntary assisted dying before the New South Wales Parliament. I don't want any detail here, but we're the only state in Australia that doesn't have New South Wales statutory approval for voluntary assisted dying. I don't want to go into the pros and cons, but I do want to ask you both one question. Former Premier Michael Baird, and I mentioned this last week, is opposed to voluntary assisted dying, but he has acknowledged respect for those who advocate for euthanasia, arguing that they are well-intentioned. But he said, with deep respect to all sides of the debate, I call on New South Wales not to follow, but to lead towards a society where every last moment of life is cherished and remembered. And he then said, supported by universally available palliative care, because every life matters until the last breath. My question, can I ask you both what happens if there is not universally available palliative care? I've had a story brought to my attention this week. An elderly man with cancer visited by family, now that restrictions have been lifted, 2 members of the family. They were shocked to see a man unshaven, his hair not cut, his nails not cut or cleaned, and no one prepared to offer him the dignity that these small services provide. Walter, is universally available palliative care a phrase or a commitment? Because for many it doesn't exist.
Well, Alan, I agree with you and Mike Baird. In fact, the words that you quoted from Mike Baird, I could have written. And I'm on the Rural and Regional Health Inquiry, and people in rural and regional areas have no access to palliative care. Now, I believe how we treat people in the last days of their lives is how we judge ourselves as a society.
Absolutely.
So I'm a strong supporter of palliative care, and I'm one of the few, and I'll have to admit that I'm one of the few Labor MPs that'll be voting no on the Alex Greenwich bill.
Tanya,
it's something that
coming
I've
to
thought
you.
about a long. Sorry.
Yeah. Tanya, coming to you, I mean, is universally available palliative care a phrase or a commitment? Because, I mean, this was a person I might add in a Sydney hospital. It wasn't way out in the regions, Tanya.
Well, that's a really sad story, and unfortunately, it's a story that I've heard also in my local community out in Western Sydney. And as a local member, I was approached by residents in my electorate to start a petition calling for a palliative care unit to be established in the $1 billion Nepean Hospital redevelopment that we are funding. So we don't have yet universally available palliative care, but I'm a firm believer that that is certainly the direction that this government needs to embrace and embrace more fully. We certainly have funded significantly palliative care in the last recent number of years. In fact, a handful of years ago, we announced $100 million towards palliative care, but much more needs to be done, because I don't believe anyone necessarily wants to die. They just want their suffering to end, and quality, world-class palliative care can actually do that.
Dead right. That's what Walter said. There has to be dignity for people in old age. And this was in a Sydney hospital. Absolute disgrace. Tanya,